Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks Podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube video under the channel of Zenitsu, on top of being on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Please feel free to leave a rating, like, follow, subscribe, review, whatever, depending on the platform that you're listening on. It really does help support the podcast. Today, I am back with Jay Stewart, and we are going to be kind of doing a little bit of a twofold. First, we're going to be basically asking the question of the week, which should turn into a little bit of a discussion, talking about what we're actually thankful for when it comes to the Digimon trading card game, because it is Thanksgiving after all, so might as well have some of that in there. And then on top of that, we are going to be talking about, this is a little bit more divisive, but we're going to be discussing what we would want to see out of the ban and restriction list when it comes to the current environment of the game. And I know that scrambles are going to be coming in, and that's going to be changing the environment a little bit, but I don't necessarily think that is going to impact our overall thoughts and opinions on the current state of affairs. And it's always fun to talk about ban and restrictions, unrestrictions, and limitations. So I guess we could just start things off with the question of the week, which is, what are you thankful for when it comes to the Digimon trading card game? So anyone in the chat or any viewer watching it as a video or on the podcast, feel free to leave your answer to the question down in the comments below. Jay Stewart, what are you actually thankful for when it comes to the Digimon trading card game?
So for me, I kind of have two things in a way that I'm thankful for. So one of the first things is the whole unification that Bandai is trying to do. I understand that, there is still there are some people that are like a little bit iffy about the whole unification, the trying to pull cards, and everything. But if I really am thinking about it, no other card game really has a unification where everybody gets the cards the same day as JP does, for example. Or we would have to sit there and wait for it to get the cards. And then by the time we get the cards, it's already been solved. So by us having a unification, I mean, technically speaking, there is going to be a lot more data of this that said, but we could also see a lot of unique things get explored potentially that other people might not be thinking about, for example. Like, for example, maybe people will try, like, imagine if the, the B deck, for example, if that came out day one, maybe people would be more willing to try and play that at their locals if they weren't worried about, oh, I know what the meta is kind of scenario. But the second thing, and this is the more important one, I'm more thankful for is the store regionals that Bandai did announce and everything. I think once they announced that, I know it was kind of like off to a rough start of how many stores could do it and everything, but we're just seeing that more and more stores are coming along. I think this is a great thing. Not only does this give people who don't want to play online, it gives like people a chance to go somewhere, not even have to probably even drive that far to go to and everything. And even allows like stores, like the local communities to actually get a lot of players to come there potentially go, oh, I didn't know this area had Digimon, for example. So I could actually play there. And it's just, to me, I love the idea of what the store regionals is.
Yeah, I think that they are doing a better job, but I always think, especially when it comes to anything Bandai related, there's always room for improvement. Bandai as a company is very hit and miss with how they treat their things. But I think like what you're thankful for is 100% valid. Not a lot of Japanese-based card games are unified. There are a couple of games that are unified. This outside of the Bandai sphere, obviously, because Dragon Ball Fusion World is a unified game, but like when it comes to Japanese made games, those generally aren't unified, like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, even Vanguard, Weiss Schwartz. There's a lot of things that they have before us, and that generally does impact how we perceive the game as we know it. I'm not saying that's one of the things that I'm thankful for. I'm just saying it's not a bad thing to be thankful for. What I'm actually thankful for more so is like kind of just the way they've been treating not like the IP, but just the amount of love and attention that they still give the card game when it comes to the actual cards and the actual references from the inspiration that they're taking the card from. Like, they could just be generic, here's a monster, this is the design defect, it doesn't matter if it's this or that. And the fact that, like, we do have all of these references in not only just the art, but the abilities, it just enriches the experience, especially for those that are enfranchised and understand those references. And even if they don't understand those references, it's just cool to kind of like be able to understand and like where a lot of these cards and effects are even coming from to begin with. So that's one of the biggest things I've always been thankful for, and to see that trend still continue, gosh, nearly 20 main sets later is very astonishing, considering a lot of people didn't think that Digimon would have this much content, and it actually does, and we still haven't even scratched the surface of it. I mean, we technically did, but we still have like more comics to go over, we still have more games that we could go over, we still have like just some of the reference book stuff to go over. Like, there's a lot into the Digimon IP, more than what people give it credit for. And it's cool that we don't just see, oh, here's Luffy times 50. Like, sure, we have Agumon times like maybe 25, but not every set has that Agumon, where almost every set does have like that Luffy type thing when it comes to like how deep the IP actually goes to be able to create more unique characters and therefore breed interesting scenarios. So that's one of the biggest things that I'm thankful for. And then the second thing, if I had to pick a second thing that I'm thankful for, because like the first thing I kind of just am going to encompass art into it, because that's just, you know, the fact that they put that much love into the actual cards themselves. I think like the second big thing that I'm thankful for probably is the fact that the game is still alive, to be honest. Like, I know I've been a bit of a doomer recently, and I'm not going to apologize for it, because I'm a very open and honest person. Like, if I think the game is good, I'll praise it. If I think the game is bad, I'll point it out. And it's whether you're willing to listen to it or not is the big thing. And I appreciate anyone who listens to my opinions. So I guess in part I'm also thankful to that. But the fact that we are nearly 20 base sets in is definitely something to be celebrated, because not every game can say that, especially games from Bandai themselves. Like, they were talking about their Gundam TCG graveyard, trying to hype up the Gundam TCG. And it's just like, was that really a smart move? I don't think it was, but hey, it just shows that right now, this current like breadth of games that Bandai has created, it really seems like they have legs. And I really hope Bandai stops making more card games. I really freaking do. But that's not something to be thankful for. Just the fact that we exist still is one of the big things that I'm thankful for, because I love the Digimon IP. I don't want it to see it in such a negative like aspect. Like, I want the game to flourish, and I want the game to survive, because that makes me happy. Like, to be honest, knowing an IP that I love is getting the support that it needs. Now, I know Bandai doesn't do that all the time, most of the time, but that's just something that I'm at least thankful for, that we do get a bone every now and then. So,
Yeah, because I know one of the first things. Sorry, just to add on, like your comment about the first thing you said about the lore and everything, or them not even barely scratching the surface. Like, they really haven't explored everything, so to say. Like, for example, like the 20th set that's coming out in JP, that's going to be our 2.5. The leaks are saying that it's supposed to be X Chronicle Wars. That's a whole manga series in itself, but like we never had a set dedicated to Cyber Sleuth, the Digimon World, like an actual Digimon World set, or even the Digimon World redigitized, a game that they re-released like not even like 2 years ago, I think, or something. So
Well,
like,
that did
and
get a set, but they just showed it off rather than like continue to elaborate on it. And they did the same thing with Cyber Sleuth, where it's like, oh yeah, here's some Cyber Sleuth stuff in BT5. Here's some redigitized in BT11. So like they showed that they can do it. They just haven't really done anything literally past those first appearances.
yeah, and like there's even like other things like the Olympic, what is it, the
The Olympus
Olympic Digimon?
12. Yeah.
Yeah, the Olympus 12. Like there's like a lot of Digimon arcs that they've never actually explored yet that some people are hoping that maybe they will, because some people are thinking, what if they made an Olympic 12 deck? Kind of like how they did the Royal Knights and the Demon Lords.
Yeah, there's still a lot that they can go over, and we also have like, I know people hate it, but we have like Applemon that they can dip into and like extend it to the Digimon universes, because technically Applemon isn't really Digimon, but it is Digimon. It's Digimon adjacent basically, but yeah, there's still a ton that they can do that they haven't really done yet, and they still can revisit some of the animes and go back to those cash cows, because like Savers, for example, or Data Squad, for those who watched it in English, like we still have the middle section of that story that they have not adapted into the card game. We have the beginning and we have the end, but we don't have the middle part. So like there's still more villains and more things that they can do with it to be able to expand what those are capable of too. So they've been trying to not throw everything all out all at once within the first 8 sets. Looking at you again, One Piece. And they're actually like taking their time figuring out how they could expand what story they're trying to adapt versus the cards that they want to make.
Yeah, and then even the other comment you made too about like Luffy getting reprinted 50 times, even though Agumon's got to reprint 50 different times. But the very unique thing about Digimon is not all Agumons are the same. Like, take the one from Savers. It goes up a completely different line. The one from Digimon Adventures goes into the famous War Greymon that we all know. And even look at the Agumon in EX8. That Agumon's dedicated for Tyrannomon support. So, like, there might be 50 different Agumons, but not Agumons are the same for every deck.
Right, and they'll also do other things, and yeah, like that's the beauty of Digimon, is the fact that it's just because you see the same character doesn't mean it's doing the same thing. Or like, I mean, I guess that's true for the other games, but like just because you see the same character doesn't mean that it is actually the same character. That's probably a better interpretation of it, because Agumon is different between all of them, but Luffy and Goku and all that, they're literally all the same characters. So like it doesn't really matter. And Gundam's going to be that same way. I think Gundam has a bigger well because of all of the different stuff that they have, but I don't know how many Freedom Gundams they're going to be printing as an example.
Let alone even Kira Yamato or Setsuna FSA, Amuro, Char Aznable. Like, even
Yeah.
Char Aznable, he has like 20 different suits that he uses in that series, let alone. So it's like they're going to keep reprinting Char, and then eventually it's going to get to the point where it's like, oh, you could just run an entire Char deck or something at some point in that. I already know, and the game hasn't even came out yet.
I mean, yeah, especially with the whole pilot mechanic, but that's getting too deep into like not Digimon related stuff. Um, but like it just goes to show that Bandai has a pattern for this type of stuff, and based on that pattern, Digimon has the freshest take to that formula that they've been doing. I guess that's kind of where I'm getting at. So I guess we could like I said, anyone in chat or comments that's a listener or viewer, feel free to tell us your stuff, what you're thankful for, down in the comments below. And now we get to have more fun kind of discussing bans and limitations, because oh boy, do I think we're due. I know some people also think that we're due. Some people want it to be nuclear. Some people want it to be on the lighter side. We all have difference of opinions, and that's partially the fun of it. And what we're going to be discussing here is whose opinion is actually right. No, it's like just our interpretation of what we want to see get limited or banned or unlimited, depending on your perspective. So I know you are in the unlimit camp, Jay Stewart. I'm in the never unlimit stuff because it's on the ban and limit list for a reason. But is there anything that you feel like, because I based on that, I already just don't want anything to come off. But do you feel like there's anything that should come off or could come off that wouldn't be like too bad?
Yeah, so I think there's only really one card that could potentially come off the ban list, and I think everybody might mutually agree about it for the most part, or they can actually hear the reason why and go, it's understandable at the same time, if that makes sense. But I think the only card that could potentially come off the ban and restriction list is the Greymon X Antibody from BT11. Mostly because of the fact that all other decks really are doing the same thing. Like, it's in order to give both the black base and the red base the capability of Greymon to kind of catch back up to what all other decks are doing. Because either a lot of the level 4s, like if you were like are gaining like a bunch of memory when they evo and stuff, or even reducing the evo cost in their own effects too at the same time. I mean, it kind of makes it to where you look at other decks and go, oh, well, that's kind of what Greymon was already doing to begin with back in the day. And even its whole protection thing, it's not like a broken thing like Garurumon X Antibody from EX5 was. It's a one-time use. Like, you have to have a very specific you have to have X Antibody in the source, and you have to bottom deck it. So you're not even going to want to run the protoform because of the fact that you want to have protoform in the source, so that way you could grab one of your source material when it's removed and recover. So you're running mostly the old original BT9X Antibody.
I mean, to be fair, Greymon was designed, like, you could very clearly tell how things are designed based on when they're made. So, like, when Greymon X Antibody was made, there was no protoform. Protoform was barely even a thought in development at that time. And it was made with the idea and intention of the X Antibody from BT9 involved. So, like, you could see that down to just how the cards flow and, like, some of the other combinations of cards that are designed around it. So, like, a good example is you have the BT12 Metal Greymon, where you want to use its raid ability, and the X Antibody option lets you go either into the metal or into the level 6. So you have two different options, like the Metal X or the 6. So you have two different options, but you still get to use the full intended ability of that raid, and then when the attack target is switched, do something. In this case, it's play a tamer. So you can kind of see like where their design philosophy is based on when the card was made and what it's supposed to interact with. So, like, yes, it is technically harder for Greymon to use Protoform. Not impossible, but it is harder. And by that extent, like, that's also kind of why I don't think it should come off, like, personally, because we're sitting into an environment where if that card is now okay, whereas before it wasn't, what does that currently say about the state of the game now? So, like, by that logic, you could just unban all of the OTK enablers. So, like, okay, we could put we could put Were Gurumon, the promo, and Grand Kuwagamon, the promo, back up to max. Like, because, we already have a whole bunch of super fast OTK decks. What's the harm in more? I mean, there is technically harm in more, but like that's the same type of logic. It's like, just because it's okay now doesn't mean that that's actually okay. At least that's my perspective.
No, and it's a fair perspective, because I could lean to seeing either way of that idea too at the same time. Because let alone, like, I mean, Greymon is kind of like the whole mascot of Digimon, so it's only a matter of time before Greymon gets broken again. It's like, okay, does this need to get put back on the ban restriction list, so to say?
Right, and then that brings up the conversation again, where it's just like, okay, because usually the intention of a ban and restriction list is to depower the game. It's not to further increase the power. That's the job of the new sets. The ban and restrictions is to check the overall power level of the game and be like, is this where we want the game to currently be at? Right now, I don't think the answer is yes, but if we do start slowing down the more problematic decks, like, that doesn't mean we should unban something to speed up other decks as well, because maybe that would then create another power imbalance that they're not even thinking about. So that's a very real possibility. So it's just easier to leave things banned or limited. And this is where I'm gonna like start to hijack the conversation. I think we actually should start banning cards a little bit more. Like, there's a couple of cards that I just would be 100% okay with just seeing gone, because the power level of the game is already so high that it's making certain cards even more problematic, especially as a one-of. So, like, Hidden Potential Discovered is a card I just would be okay with seeing gone. Another good card I would be okay seeing gone is Calling from the Darkness. Calling from the Darkness in a lot of, like, purple cards, because of the high levels of recyclability, one of isn't actually one of. So one of just means you have a lower chance of seeing it, but once you see it, you can see it over and over and over again, and it's like the card never even left. I kind of also want to see Bukamon gone, because I think, like, it just being the de facto 5th egg for any blue deck ever is still kind of just dumb. I'm not, like, I wouldn't care if it wasn't. Like, that's such a lower priority compared to some of the other cards. And then other cards that I would like to see gone, probably Uko and Louis and Hammer Spark. I think those are... Oh, and Anubis. I think all of those are incredibly dumb cards. Just because I've always hated Uko and Louis. I think they just accelerate decks too quickly, and Louis now became this new, like, secondary hybrid for game meme that doesn't usually bode well in terms of, like, oh yeah, we're memeing on it because it's imbalanced and it's not fair. Same thing with Ukomon. Just fine if we keep the current Ukomon, just completely gut the 5th Ukomon. I do not want to see this card anymore. And then Hammer Spark, I also think, is just, like, the Luxacky nature of, like, these tempo accelerants is also kind of just stupid to me. And then, like I said, with Anubis, it's such a good card. You can just run it as a one-of in every single purple deck, and you'll never be disappointed with it. Ever. And I think that's, like, kind of problematic in homogenizing the game. Those are the cards that I want to see, like, banned. I don't know if anything else past that really needs it, to be honest. What do you have any cards that you specifically would want to see banned, Jay?
I mean, so to me, when it comes to the whole ban restriction list, as I said before, I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And they would ban cards even after putting it to 1. It's just still that broken of a card, so I kind of am in the mentality of that same thing. And the idea of the Calling from Darkness, the Hidden Potential, the Anubis, like, we're still seeing those constantly pop up in decks, like, especially the Hidden Potential. Like, it does exactly what Green wants to do, suspending its own Digimon for a free Evo cost. Like, taking Tyrant, for example, it's so broken in Tyrant if you see it, and it just it just shifts how the game state is from just that one card. Same could be said with Anubis and even the Louis, like you were kind of mentioning too, because you only need to see one of it. And there's even like we've even seen like a hybrid tamers or the ancient Garurumon. Like I'm pretty sure that one's able to play out the Louis if it wanted to. So you could literally play the Louis for free if you had something you're raising, push up for game right there.
Yeah, gain the memory to potentially keep turn and whatnot. Like, yeah, it's kind of just dumb on like what a lot of these like tempo accelerant cards, like the majority of what I want to see hit is mostly just tempo accelerants because I'm in the personal mindset that the game is moving too fast, and that's highly problematic. To the point where, like, as we're seeing right now in the meta, based on all of the meta reports and metadata that we have, literally two colors are playable, and red is only playable by proxy because Ancient Gray OTK is just another super fast, consistent OTK deck. Like, that's it. It's beatable because of the weaknesses on where it is, but that doesn't stop it from just like, oh, turn 2 or 3 stealing games because it could just see all of its pieces and just combo off. I had a whole live stream where that was half of the live stream was just showing off how dumb and fast the deck is, and it's just like, where's the room to breathe for other decks? Like, that's the other problem. Like, we already know the memes of Takumi Kazuchi being able to OTK on turn 2. Like, again, that goes to why, like, oh, by that logic of unbanning stuff, we could have the promo, like, we could have Doru Greymon back because he was enabling Alphamon to OTK. We could have promo Where Garurumon back because this is what's allowing Melga to OTK. And then we also could have Grand Kawagamon back because that's what's enabling Grandis to OTK. Like, but is more of these OTK decks really what we want? That's the bigger question. Like, and then by proxy we could have Mach back as well. Like, now you're starting to see, like, okay, if we start unbanning this particular card for this particular reason, like, we kind of just have to let the floodgates loose and unban a whole bunch of stuff, and then that introduces more problems, and then we might have to reassess after and see if those are persistent or not. Or if, like, that's actually the current state of the game, where they're okay with everything being an OTK deck. I mean, that's where the game almost kind of is now. Like, let's kill each other by turn 3, 4 at most. So, but yeah. So that's bans covered, like cards we actually want banned. And then I guess, like, going forward, we probably would be like, is this ban worthy or is this limit worthy? Because I think that, like, introducing the concept of bans and banning more cards isn't bad. And then certain cards are more ban worthy than limit worthy. So I guess to kind of kick off the whole trend, this whole trend here, a card I really just want to see, like, straight up banned. Like, it's going to feel awful. I'm not expecting it to happen right away because Bandai needs to make their money first before they pull the rug out. A card I want to see absolutely nuked from the face of the earth is Shine Greymon Ruin Mode. I know that's a very hot debate. It's a very hot card in terms of not only just its monetary value, but its level of playability. But, like, I remember all the conversations of banning Death X, and Ruin Mode is just straight up worse and more egregious than Death X, because Death X is only good in specific meta environments. Ruin Mode is good all of the time, forever, in any yellow or purple deck, and because of the amount of 2-color cards and 2-color support that's coming out, or has already came out, it's just a very easy card for a lot of decks to use, like, with almost zero thought put into it. So, like, that's partially why I just want this card gutted, because we're already running it as, like, a 1 or a 2 of. So putting it to 1 really isn't going to do it that much good, especially since, again, purple recycle. That's why, like, it kind of just needs to either be gone or just left alone. And I think this card being left alone is not good, because if I'm going to use, like, Bandai logic, it's kind of falling into the same category as Ice Wall, where it's just straight up a not fun card to play against. Like, that's it. It's just straight up not fun. And
Yeah, and I think you're fair on that too, because one of these in the past, one of my locals, I was playing against somebody, and they were playing this really weird purple deck that I had no idea what it was trying to do. It was like trying to do this Lilith loop thing, and then next thing I know, I kid you not, they evoed into Shine Greymon one single one from their trash, like three different times, to just make sure it goes, okay, this next turn, you have negative 15k. There is nothing you could put on your field that's going to survive this. And he
yeah.
almost was able to do that when the turn got back to him again. It was just like, holy crap, how am I supposed to play?
Right. And like I get it's a control card and that's what control cards do. It's supposed to make it so the opponent can't do anything or limit their actions by a significant margin. But I think Shine Greymon Ruin Mode is just a little on the overboard side. So that's the first card I kind of want to see come out of whenever the next ban and restriction list is. And I think this card just straight up needs to be banned, not limited, just banned. Because right now we're also seeing it pop up in a problematic loop deck utilizing Taumon Ace that's going to be coming out with our BT 2.5. So it's just like, okay, it's literally only just causing problems, and it's just making the game worse overall at this point. Like, granted, that deck is a little on the high rolly side, but still, the fact that it's possible is part of the problem. And that's just a small, tiny snippet of what the card is capable of. And this isn't literally just a complaint fest. It's like, there actually is logic and reason behind why certain cards we think should get banned or limited. Some of them are going to be good cards. Some of them are going to be, like, more hot takes. But this is all just to try to like look at where the current meta landscape is and rebalance things, because literally half the meta right now, if not more so of the meta, is purple, and they're all running Shine Greymon Ruin Mode. And because Shine Greymon Ruin Mode exists, it starts limiting the decks that are even viable on top of the colors that are viable, because now they have to compete with a card like that, and sometimes they just can't. So
Yeah.
That's my one of my first picks of this ban and restriction draft.
Yeah, so if I'm going to go ahead next and everything, mine's also going to be a little bit of a hot take here, but there is a reason to the madness. And I would say it has to be it's not just one, it's both of these. The Dusk and Dawn Tamers, the Ko and Sayo, and then Sayo and Ko, the red and the blue ones. Mostly because of the fact that we've already seen Bandai having to put a choice restriction. They didn't call it choice restriction, so to say, but we know what it is.
Yeah, it's a ban pairing.
Yeah, on the blue one. And we've already seen people trying to break the blue one again by using like the Homer Tamer and like it's high rolly and everything. But like I'm pretty sure we have seen that deck top before. And even when it comes to the red one, like literally the store regionals I went to in up in Iowa, there was that deck that was just using the Galactic deck engine, and it was just busted because of that tamer just able to tuck the source, go into another Galgamon, get even more memory when they did that too. It was just, I'm not saying it was ridiculous, but it was just like, holy crap! Like this is busted. Like you're getting so much memory and advantage because of this, and they're not even running the Galactic deck, so to say. They're just running that engine because it's the best thing for blue. Like they could go into the Hexablow on top of it just to try to lock because of all the sources they have. And I'm pretty sure there's other blue decks out there that really use those sources to their best advantage because of that.
Well, so it's mostly just because the value engine of just basically evolving for like net zero or gaining memory off of what Ko and Sayo more specifically is doing. I think like they have to leave one of these alone, and I think the one that they're going to leave alone is the blue one, Sayo and Ko. They just need to update the cards that it's choice restricted with. Like honestly, because like the blue tamer is the lifeblood for Grace Nova. Like, that is how you Grace Nova. Without this card, that deck does not functionally exist. So I think, like, the blue one, they're going to have to choice restrict a little bit more. I think that would make it more fair. But I do kind of agree that, like, the Red Tamer kind of just needs to get limited to one because it's just enabling all of the degenerate stuff that, like, oh, I'm just going to play Grace Nova low end and then generic blue or generic red top end. It works better with blue because there's just more blue and more good stuff in blue than red, but, like, it technically is possible in red. But yeah, so I think hitting the Ko and Sayo definitely is something that should be necessary. Because, again, part of the big problem, like, you're going to realize this pattern. This is going to be a huge spoiler alert. A lot of the problems with Digimon literally comes down to speed and efficiency. And Sayo and Ko is a speed problem. Like, it literally is just being abused with the rest of the levels 3 through 5 to be able to just get free evolutions to then digivolve into a level 6 Digimon and then kind of just win the game off of the level 6. Most of the time, the level 6 is just a floodgate type card where it's just like, yeah, I go up into this. I don't care if I'm passing turn or whatever. But this card is just so oppressive this early in the game that it's just going to make your deck crumble underneath the weight of the pressure.
Yeah, the choice restriction update, that is definitely something that needs to happen for sure at minimum when it comes to that blue one. I mean, I don't think it would need to get hit, but it just kind of depends if people just keep finding different ways to keep breaking it, because eventually at some point they're going to have to say, we need to stop choice restricting and we just have to hit it, and maybe even make new versions of those tamers that aren't as broken, that is dedicated for just the galactic deck.
Yeah, I think, like, part of the other problem when it comes to Digimon card design is, like, general usability. If the general usability is too high, then there's never a reason not to use the card. And that's why all of these engines are propping up, is because these engines are more efficient than everything else in the entire game, more so than the actual dedicated support that the deck is supposed to have. And I think that's the big underlying issue, is like, oh, that's pretty sad. And that's why the next card that I want to see banned/limited, this is probably going to be more on the limited side. Anyone who's, like, visually watching, I'm going to be, like, putting all of the cards up on a database. 1 means I want it banned. 2 means I want it limited. I know that's a little awkward, but because I'm using a deck builder, that's just the formatting that's going to have to go. But as far as the next card, that would be Doberman X. I think Doberman X is a huge problem. More so than Cerberus X, to be honest. Like, we have cards like Cerberus X, so, like, Cerberus isn't that big of a deal. It's more so the Dober, because what Dober is doing is allowing the deck to move faster. So, because this is one of the few cards that actually does have a win, digivolve, draw, and discard that is in, like, a very specific evolutionary line that is hyper efficient, that's insanely problematic. Because I think, like, if you literally just take out Doberman, the dog engine starts slowing down by a significant margin, because now they don't have a good level 4 that they could digivolve into and gain all of the extra benefits of all of the different other tools that it's playing with. So it's like, oh, this makes BT14 Gobbly worse. I think Gobbly's another, like, insanely stupid card, but, like, this makes it slightly worse because now you're not just drawing and discarding as consistently, and the fact that it's inheritable also helps gain memory is also part of the issue. It's just a whole bunch of compounding factors, because most of the time people aren't even playing any Dobermans because they don't draw and discard. It's as literal simple as that. They do not draw and discard to be able to trigger Gobbly's ability, therefore it's not nearly as efficient. So I honestly think Dober X out of the whole dog package is one of the key proprietors that has to kind of go. Because the other thing is like memory generation when it comes to blue and purple is only as strong. It's because those are more proactive memory generations, not reactive memory generations. So like if you take a card like Palmon as an example, Palmon from BT14 more specifically, it's a memory generator because its start of main ability says that during all turns, when you could give a Digimon the ability for when it becomes suspended, they lose 2 memory. Green has a lot of ways to suspend Digimon, but the big thing is they need to have a Digimon, like the opponent needs to have a Digimon in order for you to suspend to then gain the memory. So it requires something on the opponent's side to interact with. Whereas utilizing BT14 Goblimon and by proxy it's EX4 Gaomon, like these rookies that have inheritables that gain memory, they're just too easy to trigger on your own, which is what's making them stronger than every other rookie in the entire game when it comes to this type of ability. And Dober is just one of the big, like, obviously, the big answer is just to hit those types of cards, but Bandai really doesn't like to do that. So they like to try to skirt around the problem rather than ban the problem itself. So that's kind of my logic behind it. And Dober is a card that's playing into the problem, making it the problem to begin with.
Yeah, no, I think I could agree because even on I had Dober X and Cerberus X Antibody. I'm like some of my choices. I'm not saying every single card needs to get hit, but it's like one of these need to get hit because the way I saw Cerberus X was it sets up the OTK potential for the deck because the whole if you have the X Antibody underneath, yada yada yada, you get to play another Digimon, and then even the inherit effect, you could delete a Digimon to unsuspend. Like this makes a perfect setup for the Lore Knight X, who would have Alliance, potentially even just have multiple bodies to delete with, unsuspend and swing, making that OTK potential. But at the same time, as you were saying, the memory efficiency and the setup that the Dober X is able to do is also another thing. Plus, we've also seen Bandai hit level 4 X antibodies more than the level 5s.
Actually, now that you think about that, yeah, they have like so I'm under the philosophy anytime they print X antibodies, there's gonna be a problem with it. There just almost always is going to be a problem whenever they do these types of X antibodies. Not native carriers, but like the ones that actually have X forms. Most of the time, those cards have problems. And yeah, thinking about it now, like looking at all of the banned and restricted X antibody cards, they've most of the time hit the level 4s. So, yeah, you're definitely good on that pattern recognition because like we're trying to play the role of Bandai here, and it's just like okay, we very much know what the meta is, and we're trying to figure out how to curve some of the meta decks to try to put them more in line with the rest of the game. So I think out of everything in the dog package, Dober X makes the most sense based on past trends.
Yeah. And on top of being like on the subject of being memory efficient, so these 3 cards that I'm about to say, I'm going to say they also need to be hit if Hammer Spark was hit. And that's Jack Ray, Gravity Crush, and Blinding Ray. Now, the Gravity Crush and Blinding Ray, I mean, yes, they have no security effects, but if you're able to play 4 of and everything, you don't care if one's in your security so long as you can see 1 or if not 2 in your hand at some point in the game. Because even Blinding Ray, just using that was like, it still is technically, theoretically, really good to use with the Mirage Galgamon. Or you can even use the Blinding Ray when you have set up, say, Angelomon from BT15, making it a free to gain memory without any cost. The reproduction, or the, not reproduction, Jesus, the negative effect of gaining that memory,
Yeah,
so to say.
the repercussion.
Repercussion, thank you. Sorry. And then the whole Gravity Crush is kind of like, you're not going to really care if your opponent gains 3 memory if you're going for game with that. And Jack's Ray, that one is way more stupid, and I mean stupid good, than what Hammer Spark could be. Just because of how fast purple decks are able to set up their trash, they're potentially able to go into 20 card trash by turn 3 potentially.
Yeah, and then that just makes Jack Raid technically better in every aspect than Hammerspark. Like Hammerspark was basically the base on which all of these like zero cost options are kind of like spawned from. Because they all follow very similar patterns, where it's just like Jack Raid was supposed to be the purple equivalent of Hammerspark. Then you have Blinding Ray, which is the yellow equivalent of Gravity Crush. So, like, the reason why Gravity Crush and Blinding Ray don't have inheritables is because their main ability, gaining 2 memory, is that much supposedly more powerful than the Hammerspark of gaining 1, but that's why Hammerspark has the security effect to still do something. And then you have the unplayable ones, which is Green's second one, because Green, like, HPDs are already technically on here. But Green's second one follows, I think it's like something Tropic, Tropic Venom or something. Regardless, nobody uses it for a reason because it's not good. And same thing with Blacks. Blacks is Junk something. But yeah, they follow these very similar designs, and I think like the green and black one, because of how bad they are, they're probably fine. But I think like honestly, I would probably take these and kind of just one up your idea. I would ban Hammerspark, I would ban Jack Raid, and I would limit Blinding Ray and Gravity Crush. Because out of security, out of security, Gravity Crush and Blinding Ray don't do anything. On top of the fact that you can't really recycle them. Like, you could recycle Jack Raid at the very least. So even if you put Jack Raid to 1, just the fact that it's recyclable is already a problem. Versus every other color. Blue can just draws more cards on average, which is why they hit Hammerspark to 1. But we're still seeing, like, decks find Hammerspark fairly consistently. So, like, I think because of the increased consistency, those cards should just straight up be banned. So I think those are definitely some really good ones. And going with the theme of zero cost options, this is going to probably be the hottest one, but Protoform. I want to see Protoform get banned or limited. I don't exactly know which one would be more beneficial in terms of like how players' reception would be. I think maybe limiting it to 1 is probably fine. I think the card doesn't necessarily need to get banned, but it is potentially ban worthy because it also is following that same style of trend of like, this is a tempo accelerant. The original X antibody was not a tempo accelerant. This Protoform is. Because Protoform, if you kind of like tweak the wording and just objectively think about what the card does, its main effect, yes, it's forcing you to evolve into more specifically an X antibody Digimon, but it's essentially the same level of play as I'm going to Hammer Spark and Evo for X. This is the same thing where it's like it's just a reduction of 1, so it's a gain of or a save of 1 memory, and then it just allows you to do whatever. And then the fact that this card also recycles itself is partially why I think it's like okay leaving it as a one of, is because like, yeah, okay, there's going to be specific setups where you see it once and then you could use it over and over and over again. But like that's kind of the point of Protoform, so I feel like just banning it would kind of defeat the whole purpose.
Yeah, no, I think that is kind of fair. I mean, I personally don't have a personal beef with X antibody Protoform, but there is I do have an understanding of why some people might be saying that, because for the Lord Nightmon deck, by an example, it's a 4-of. Like, everyone says you have, well, it's a 3 to 4, but everyone is like in agreement, like you can't play more than just 2. You have to play more than 2. Just because of how powerful of an effect it provides. Let alone just like it gives other decks access to recovery that, quote unquote, recovery that they normally wouldn't have, so to say.
Well, also, I think like the other big problem of protoform is it completely single-handedly invalidates every other X antibody. Like it invalidates the X antibody mechanic, where it's like the whole idea is you're either going to go on top of the base or need the X antibody in the source. Well, this literally acts as the X antibody in the source while you don't need the base. The other one, you kind of do need the base. You don't, but you do at the same time. But like, so we just got spoiled a new Gallantmon X antibody, and there's no reason to run any of the Guilmon cards. You could literally just play like Galaxy Engine and then just throw in protoforms to just make Gallantmon X antibody work. Like that's, in my perspective, the problematic nature of what this card does is it invalidates a lot of the X antibody cards while simultaneously supporting them. It's weird. I don't like it. So like I've seen Lord Nightmon decks where it's like, yeah, it's just using some other engine and then it's just throwing in Protoform and then Lord Nightmon X antibody. And then that's it. That is the deck. It's just I don't like that it invalidates that. Plus, again, 0 options that generate memory are proving to be problematic, especially the more proactive ones. Like you kind of mentioned with Blinding Ray, where trashing the top is not actually a cost. Discarding is not actually a cost anymore either. Like, they pretend like there are these costs, but they're not really costs. And I think that's part of the problem is, like, Bandai thinks that, oh, discarding a card is a negative thing. No. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, Bandai. Discarding a card is a positive thing. You shouldn't be rewarding us with more rewards for doing something that the deck already wants to do. That's why we get into Impmon situations where it's just like, yeah, I'm just accelerating and rewarding the deck for milling when milling was already the thing that the deck wanted to do. That's what's making, like, Deathslinger kind of OP, and definitely Rivals Barrage 100% OP, is because of the fact that, like, you're rewarded for milling it, which milling is seen as a bad thing, so they need to pair it up with a positive thing, but because it's actually a positive, now that positive becomes a super positive, in a sense.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, like, I think another card too that we kind of mentioned about this deck earlier, but like even the whole aspect of discarding equals a reward, I would even argue that BT14 Balmon, I say this one because of the fact that its effect is not once per turn. So theoretically, because of how the Fenrir Lugmon deck does work, you could theoretically, technically Evo into the level 7 from just having the level 4 swing. Like, certain level 4 swing effect when attacking, you trash a card, that allows Balmon to activate its effect, go into the Soul Luger when digivolving, trash a card. Oh, Balmon's effect goes again. Fenrir Lugmon, and it just so busted of how broken the Balmon can potentially be that even Bandai made another Balmon that's like a lot less good quotations than what the BT14 Balmon is.
Yeah, I think, like, the big problem with BT14 Baumon is literally the way its effect works completely invalidates the entire memory system of the game, which is why, like, this plus how Takamikazuchi functions is why, like, I think Baumon without Takamikazuchi is a lot more fair, but once you add in Takamikazuchi, you just no longer need to worry about memory on how much you're going to be spending, as long as you could technically still spend it. So, like, you have these, like, this is literally why the deck can OTK as early as turn 2, is because drawing and discarding again is insanely good. And this allows us to use those cards more efficiently than Goblibon from BT14. Because, like, sure, okay, in, let's just say, SOC, or not even in SOC, if you just wanted to, like, have a level 4 draw and discard just to evo into a level 4 for 1, sure, there are other things to do it with, but they more specifically want to interact with other things, where Dober was a little bit more agnostic, and Baumon is just, absolutely insane at being able to just cheat on memory in general, because Fen Takamikazuchi just snaps you back to maintain your turn. So literally nothing you spent mattered. And then that's kind of like what we're going to see a little bit with the scramble cards potentially, is because they have a similar style of effect, and not like actually effect, but they have this like window of opportunity where you could spend unlimited amount of memory because of the interaction that scrambles have with start of or memory setting tamers. So I think like that's a really interesting dynamic that, while it's cool, only further exacerbates the problem that memory should actually be a resource used for balancing and shouldn't be used to just straight up ignore the current state of the game. Which is why I agree with your Baumon hit.
Yeah, like it'd be different if the Balmon was once per turn, but the fact that it's not, it allows that effect to just constantly proc off, and getting to proc the same effect off multiple times we've seen in the past just makes something really stupid broken.
Yes. So talking about ignoring memory and making things stupid broken, there's obviously a couple of other cards that I wanted to highlight, but I think Imperial is definitely a hot topic, because Imperial has a lot of cards that he plays with. So there are the BT12, XV, and Stingmon that a lot of people want to see gone. But honestly, like, I do think that effect is highly problematic, because anytime they can gain memory in any way, shape, or form is like insane. But I think like literally the bigger symptom to what's making these cards overperform is more so the tamer Davison Ken. So like this is kind of where you have the option where it's like you're either going to hit the BT12 level 4s, or you're going to hit the brand new tamer. And honestly, I think for where the current state of the game is, hitting the tamer just makes way more sense, because the cards just become okay. Like they are insane right now because the tamer helps set it up for basically free and gains you the memory to be able to digivolve into them more efficiently. So like this is the symptom to the problem that's making the problem more of a problem. So like you could go back and forth on if the level 4s need to get hit or if the tamer gets hit. I'm more in the camp of the tamer getting hit, to be honest. Like this at least gives more room for the other DNA decks to use their tamers to breathe a little bit, because the big thing on why those decks aren't performing as well as Imperial is literally because they do not have the same equivalent level 4s to just gain the memory when they're digivolving, or like DNA digivolving more specifically. So I think like because of that, hitting the tamer is probably going to be the best course of action, because this can be abused with any VMon being able to play it out for free. So other decks that are running VMon based cards are using this as well. And then the effect to just gain a memory is generic. It doesn't even have to be specifically for DNA. It's just as long as you're digivolving into a blue or a green Digimon. So a lot of decks are finding ways to be able to abuse this ability outside of that. And then if they just so happen to DNA, then they get even more value. So I think the tamer compared to the level 4s is the bigger problem. I think it's okay limiting it to 1, because we do have tamer removal that people are still kind of running. So it's like, yeah, okay, fine. Tamers being at 1 are less reusable than some of the other cards. Unless they're in purple, then everything's reusable, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money with that one, because I'm almost on the same opinion of that too. Because the thing with like the Davis and Ken is you could hatch an Evo into say a VMon, play the Davis and Ken, and you're already threatening to possibly Imperial Dramon your opponent on turn 2, But even like if you don't have that set up yet, the Tamer allows you to play like the Warmon, the Vmon searchers, and then you get to add them back to your hand. That allows you like, hey, you can't remove that threat now because it's in my hand. So therefore, I could do that same thing over and over again and just keep constantly searching. And to me, I think the X Vmon is the more problematic one, not just because of the one from BT12, not just because of the memory gain, but because it also gives jamming. Because the level 5 is able to, in fact, unsuspend attack multiple times. The jamming gives it that nice protection that allows you to swing multiple times. Like if it didn't have the jamming, I don't know if like the XVmon would be as bad, so to say. But the jamming is what makes it really good for doing those early aggression checks. But I think one other card that is majorly more problematic is Return to the Primogenitor. That's what we saw from the movie, and practically it's for a 2 cost you can evo into a level 5 or higher free trait Digimon by reducing the cost by 4. So it's not even just Paildramon and Imperial Dramon, it's any free trait Digimon. But then the other thing too is the alterns, one of your Digimon with free trait would be deleted. Other than by one of your effects, you could pop that option card to then Digivolve that Digimon into Imperial Dramon in your hand. So if you have like a free trait level 6 on the field, you could evo into your ace for free and give it, quote unquote, it has a protection because it's just any type of removal from play, which triggers that. So, and the fact that a lot of the level 6s also are aces, you can't even swing over if you wanted to, which is the other problem too.
Like, Imperial has a lot of stuff going for it, like between its toolboxing potential, having like literally the capabilities to counter everything in the entire game, to its protection and speed. But honestly, like, I think the bigger like issue is a speed thing. Like, you could have strong, powerful, and impactful cards, but if they're harder to go up into, then those top end cards become less efficient as a whole. So, like, honestly, that's kind of why I think, like, getting rid of the Davis and Ken is probably, like, the biggest thing to impact the deck with as little cards being hit as possible. I don't necessarily think they're going to hit Return. I don't think they're going to hit Pail. They're definitely not going to hit Imperial. Like, there's just cards that, based on past, like, past references, utilizing what we currently have banned and limited, they're not really going to be touching them because they're the setups to the problem, but they're not the symptom in a sense. And I think like that's why Davis and Ken probably is the big card to hit out of Imperial if we're going to be tackling Imperial more specifically. And then talking about decks that we should hit more specifically, I know a lot of people. This is on a lot of people's like shit list. But Mirage is a card that people just want gone. The BT11 Mirage Gaugamon being easily one of the best, like, generically good blue Digimon in the entire game is kind of nutty. And a lot of people feel like this card has overstayed its welcome, and I probably am apt to agree because you're triggering his Altern's ability yourself no matter what. So you're always going to be having that. The only real counter to it is to, like, not, like, there's limited answers to what this card can do, especially, again, if the issue is speed and you're able to get up into him early, then you have to have very specific responses to out this card. Otherwise, you're going to lose to this card. And it's one of those cards where it's just like, the cost is not really the printed cost. So, like, it has a Digivolution cost of 4, which is on the higher side. It does not have any name-specific evolutions, so it can't reduce itself, but it does reduce itself in a sense, because his Wind Digivolving combos with his all turns, and it's going to happen almost 100% of the time. I think the only situation it wouldn't happen is if they don't have any security left and they don't have anything to bounce, then the effect actually wouldn't do anything. But by that point, you should already be winning the game. And I think, like, Mirage is definitely a card that is way overstayed its welcome. And it's not like we don't have other Mirages we can play instead. So like we do have the BT13 Mirage, which is actually a pretty good card in of itself. That's being completely overshadowed because of the BT11 Mirage. You could theoretically still, if you really wanted to, run BT4 Mirage. It's doing something similar in terms of the memory gain aspect to make itself a cheap level 4 Digimon. Sure, it's a less efficient card overall, but that's kind of the point. Is like you still have substitutions that you could use so you could still utilize burst mode and do all the same stuff. It's just less egregious.
Yeah, and I think I'm on the same page as you with the whole Mirage from BT11 getting hit. Not just because of the fact that it overshadows what the BT13 is capable of doing, but it's just that stupid broken of a generic card. It's practically the Anubis, but blue, like of how generically good it is. Because literally, if I was literally when I was prepping for Iowa and everything, I was thinking of playing Blue Hybrid, and then I just kind of debated myself. It's like, ooh, do I want to play Venusmon or do I want to play the Mirage Galgamon? Just because of how stupid broken that Mirage is, and let alone even the like the Galaxy Loop deck that I was talking about. It was running a Mirage in it because of that's just how stupid broken it is. It's that just too good generic of a card. And like we've seen like Mirage loops and everything that come out. There's like a fish engine. There's so many different versions that rely on using that. It's just ridiculous because you can't even hit anything really in the lower end, so to say.
Oh
It
no, you
has to be
100%
that
can.
one.
Yeah, no, you 100%. If I were to hit a low level card in Mirage right now, it is 100% the BT16 Gaumon.
Yeah, that's the only card.
100%.
That's the only card I could think of. But then you just go, oh well, I'll just run the fish engine, or I'll just run the other 8 Galagamons that I have. I could just rely back and just go back to what the Mirage base was and everything. With the other, you still would, if the Galgamon from BT16 got hit, that still gives you 9 Galagamons that you could evo into that go into the gameplay of what you want to do. You have the one that plays a tamer, and I think you have I think the other one also does like some kind of memory gain or something. I think I can't remember for sure.
For which card?
A Galgamon. I feel like there is, but
Yeah, so for level 4 or level 6?
level 4.
Yeah, so the main ones that people are using obviously is BT16 because it's broken. This is basically the Cerberus, but for blue. Not even joking on that one. It's just as egregious as Cerberus, but in blue. Then you have the one that's setting up a Thomas if you don't have a Thomas on the field. That's usually ran as like a one of, just because it's outside of literally that one function, it's not that great of a card. It's inheritable, gaining you DP is like completely irrelevant because you have jamming. It's not 100% irrelevant, just mostly irrelevant. Then the other one is the EX4 one, which has the inheritable to gain you memory, which is really good. And it's when Digivolving bounces a level 3, which is also still really good. But yeah, the low level card 2 hit is going to be either the EX4 Gao or the BT16 Gao. And honestly, like one of those should realistically get hit. Just because, like, if we're following the same logic with Anubismon, or like not Anubismon, Dober X, as we are with Gao, I think like Gao honestly should get limited as well. Like, yeah, okay, you could say we're just neutering and butchering the deck, but I honestly think like maybe the Gao isn't. No, it's still kind of problematic even in its own engine, but I guess if we're hitting, so like, okay, this is the part where it's like from a bigger picture perspective, because we're hitting the Saya and the Koen Sayo tamer, and because we're also hitting Mirage, do we actually need to hit Gao, like the BT16 Gaugamon?
Me personally, I don't think so because the Galgamon combined with that Red Tamer is what allows you to gain a lot of advantage and a lot of memory. So if you could just hit that one Tamer, there's no reason you need to hit the level 4 as well. And as I stated before, like, I don't think the level 4 itself, like, yes, it can be problematic, but it's just the fact that there's other cards you could replace it with, or you could just run Mirage back to what its actual true archetype deck was, and it would still be good if you don't hit the level 6. That's my personal opinion, at least, when it comes to that.
No, I feel you on that. I think like a card like Dober X, because Gao is more engine tight and like gameplay tight, whereas Dober is a little bit more agnostic and just easier to use. I think like, and because we're also hitting more cards centered around what this card interacts with, I think like, yeah, we could very easily just leave it alone.
Yeah, because we have seen Mirage Galgamon get a lot of tops and everything before the BT16 released. So it's not like the deck needed to use it. It just, when it came out, it's like, oh, this makes it even better than what it was before. And if it's gone, then it's like, oh, well, I'm not as good as I was with it, but I'm still good without it.
Yeah. Um, and speaking of decks that are like good with or without tools, well, actually, that's a terrible segue. I'll just go into the next card I really want to see gone from the game, and it's going to be a shocker to like nobody, because I want Magnamon X Antibody nuked. Like, I think Magnamon X Antibody, the secret rare from BT16, is a incredibly damaging card to the game as a whole because of what that card does and what it represents. I like, sure, you can make the argument of keeping it as a one of. I honestly just want the card nuked. I do not think it's a card that the game needed to exist, because this card single-handedly warped the entire game around what is playable because of this card. There's a lot of decks that are just completely and 100% invalidated because they have no answers to Magnamon X. It was harder for blue than it was for yellow, because yellow could more proactively interact with its security. But now that yellow's curbed, blue is still doing strong. People are still wondering how this card is still good. And I'm shocked that people even are asking that question. And it's just like, wait, Magnamon is still good? And I'm like, yes, it's the biggest gatekeeper card in the entire game. Like, it single-handedly is invalidating a lot of decks just because they don't have answers to it. Like, that's why Numemon was doing so well, was because it actually was one of the few decks that had answers to it. And that's why we saw, like, this dramatic drop in playability in terms of decks from BT15 unrestricted to BT16 when Magnamon was introduced. Like, that's why I really honestly think Magnamon should go. Like, more so compared to other cards. Like, the protection's stupid, the aggression is stupid, the 3 colors is stupid, everything about the card is just incredibly stupid.
No, and I think that's fair, because I think there was a deck that topped at some regional where it was using like a combination of what the Imperial bottom end was trying to do, but with armors instead. And then they would DNA into the Pyildramon, and then it would Evo into the Magnamon X Antibody, because it's kind of took two of the best decks and kind of mixed them together, so to say. I don't remember who the person was, but I know
Dan.
it's like somebody.
Well, yeah. Dan was the one who's currently using it as the premier NA Imperial Dramon player. And he realized, like, okay, so if you have one of the best players on Imperial Dramon, and he's not running Imperial Dramon because Magnamon X is just functionally better, that should tell you something. Granted, Japan was doing it a little bit before, and Dan probably, as a good player, picked up on like, oh, Magnamon is just an incredibly dumb card that's very easy to use. Huh. I wonder what happens if I start using it myself. And then he sees results, and he's just like, this is what happens. Got it. Most decks just can't handle Magnamon X. It's literally as simple as that. It's if you want to like use Bandai verbiage, it's probably the equivalent of like again Ice Ball, if you really want to be simple, like it just makes the game a not fun and enjoyable experience because there is no game to be played because you can't deal with the card for a lot of decks. So, yeah, I want to see Magnamon X gone.
Yeah. And I think there's only one card left that I have, and I'm not saying it needs to get hit right now, but I think this is a card we do need to watch out for, and that's the BT14 Patamon. Now, granted, as I said in the last episode, the Patamon is kind of a high roll kind of effect kind of card, but it's literally just one card away from being broken again and allowing other decks to just abuse what it wants to do. Because the moment there's another card out there, like what the BT14 TK could do for the deck, it doesn't matter if it like gains your memory, so long as it could perfectly set your security up for what you need to do, that Patamon becomes stupid broken again, and therefore invalidating any other yellow deck out there, so to say. I think Patamon for BT14 is something to keep an eye out for if something like that TK ever comes out again. My opinion.
Yeah, I'm just gonna be quickly flipping through my video, my old like ban restriction video that I made with the nuclear ban list idea, just for some other final thoughts because I think we hit like a lot of the good stuff. Because I guess the bigger question is like, so let's take a look at where the meta is and what we've currently hit to see if the curving actually would probably be beneficial before we think about tackling any other cards. I think like Patamon definitely is a card worth watching. I don't think it's worth hitting right this very second.
Right.
So right now, currently, I think I made a better Facebook post on it. On where the current meta is. I just have to search for myself. I know, searching for myself. How weird. No, that's not it. That's not it. I could have swore it was easier to find. Because it was a more recent post. Somebody asked what the like current meta was, and then I had a pretty well written answer for it. But essentially, like, what we're trying to impact is where the meta currently is. So I'll just load up where the EX7 meta is, because that's the last frame of reference. Because nothing really has changed that much. So the only things we haven't really touched on is, like, is there something from Ancient Greymon or Purple Hybrids that needs to be hit? Like, that's... Because I think we touched on Imperial, just to try to curve it a little bit. We touched on Mirage. We touched on technically Levia and Lord Nightmon. I think maybe more could have been done. Well, I guess technically Jackraid is a card that is slightly impacting Purple Hybrids. Slightly. I think 7th Grade Demon Lords is fine. Other than the... Oh, I guess... I know this is probably a gimme, but obviously choice restricting Mother and Shoto. I think, like, that's incredibly unhealthy. Like, granted, it's how certain decks are even able to be playable. I will give it that. But that doesn't mean that it's not an unhealthy, or it's not a healthy combination of cards.
Yeah, Shoto's the only thing I could think of that maybe might want to get touched on, just because if something else besides Mother ever comes out, but...
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think we need to hit anything from Dexter or Goromon.
I mean, you kind of, in theory, hit it a little bit if you hit the X-Antibody Protoform, because I know I love to use that card in my Dexteruga, but it's not a 4 of, like, Lord Nightmon has it. It's more of, like, 2, just because sometimes, like, the way I search is I can't always grab it.
Yeah, it's your equivalent to Hammer Spark for any generic X antibody deck. It's like I need to just save myself one memory. Oh, Protoform, cool. That's the easy way to save memory. We don't really need to hit Omnimon. I mean, I would like to, but I don't know what I would hit other than the stupid delay option, but that's kind of just how the deck functions, so can't really hit that. Um, we already talked about the choice restrict on Mother Shoto, because that would also impact the Beelstar variant of purple hybrids. So that's something. Uh, yeah, and then I think the only other card I would potentially want to see go, um, that would like try to help curve, um, like red hybrids, because I honestly think that deck is like actually kind of insane with the OTK potential, is probably the promo Agunimon. I think that card can probably just not exist anymore.
Yeah, theoretically, I could see that too. I mean, for me, I was kind of thinking of the Gravity Crush just because it gives you that extra memory you need to do the stuff that you want to. But I don't know if what list you're looking at, if it even is using Gravity Crush
No,
at
they
all.
they cut using Gravity Crush. So the big thing with red, it's not red hybrids, it's more specifically red ancient. Because maybe this will let red hybrids actually have room to breathe. Like the big thing on what promo Gunimon is doing is the flexibility on what we can use him for. So I'm gonna put promo Goonie on here just because I think he is kind of getting into that dumb territory. Because his ability on when attack to Digivolve is significantly better than a when Digivolve to Digivolve, because then you're already swinging with your Digimon, which means that the attack is going to go through, again, agnostic of memory. And the fact that it is trying to cheat on memory is already it is and it isn't problematic. It's because of how aged the card is. I do think the cost reduction on it is a little bit more fair, but like the fact that it kills itself and there's ways to bypass that also is starting to be a little bit kind of problematic. The inheritable definitely is going to be problematic, just because again, like what a lot of the ancient decks are doing is they're going to digivolve into Aguni the promo in raising, and then to actually OTK the opponent, what they do is they digivolve the Aguni into the BT17 Burning Gray, and then combo off the Burning Gray to go into the Agunimon from BT7. So that way you can digivolve into your Ancient Gray from BT4, and that allows you, like, between that whole stack and interaction, I think you're spending, like, maybe 1 or 2 memory, and you're punching all of the opponent's security is gone. So all they need to do is, like, literally anything, which most of the time Blitz Omni for game is just good enough. That's what I was using personally when I was testing the deck. So, like, I think, like, the promo Lobo does not have the same level of usability as the promo Aguni. So I think maybe to try to curve the OTK potential off of the ancient ancient Greymon, the promo kind of has to go.
Yeah, you might be right on that too, because we are seeing that the uh, red hybrid, what they're kind of doing now is they're splashing like the purple color in with it too. So that's just giving them access to what purple wants to do, is like setting up your trash. I mean, you can even look at what is that tamer's name again? Takuya,
Yeah,
I think, right?
Takuya and Koji.
Yeah, like the Takuya from BT7. You're able to stack 5 hybrids under your tamer, because like I've seen somebody do it where they set up like 2 Agunis underneath, and then they just didn't evo into the Emperor, because you don't have to evo into Emperor afterwards.
Yeah, you could like
Therefore,
cancel, but most ancient decks are not using that, and they're using the Takuya and Koji because it's still similar to that Takuya, the BT7 one. You could just start shoving your hybrids underneath, and then oh, cool, I'm just going to use again the BT17 cards with the promo already underneath because you already used it once and then threw it away, and now it's in the trash for that tamer to set up. So like it just puts a lot of free pressure onto the opponent for like borderline zero actual cost. Um but yeah. So I think outside of that, like with the current state of the game and these cards getting hit, is there honestly anything else that you would feel like would need to get hit? Because do we feel because of this blue hybrids would become an issue, or if blue hybrids becomes an issue, is that actually a problem?
I mean, so the thing with the whole blue hybrid, like I'm gonna go more specifically into the ancient one because that's the one I played. Um, I mean, the only thing I could think of is the fact that they kind of already used the red engine, and because the red engine has like the best draw capability and setting up your hand perfectly, whether you're going to digicross into the ancient. I mean, the only thing I could think of, I guess, if you really theoretically want to hit, is the option card for the ancients. Theoretically speaking, I guess.
I don't think you can hit. I mean, like it's a good card. I don't think you can hit that though.
Yeah, like I don't think it changes much about it because I think I was only running it as a 2 of in my deck, so to say. So it's like I wasn't heavily relying on it. I mean, may I don't know if you maybe hit one of the Kojis or even hitting the Lobo that allows you to warp Evo in. I don't know. It's kind of like one of those weird things
Yeah, where
where
it's
it's like
like
I
not
don't know
doing
if
anything absurdly wrong. It's just one of the best fair decks in the game.
yeah, but like at the same time, the way I think of it is this: if like you hit a bunch of the other blue decks, I'm fine with if the ancients like one of maybe one other blue deck is still relatively good, so to say. So I don't want to see like 4 or 5 blue decks still be good and other colors can't shine because of it. Because if you could beat one blue deck, the other three can counter it, so to say. So I think if the meta is able to focus down on just only having 1 or 2 blue decks, so to say, it makes other colors able to try to play the anti-meta, the quotation of trying to counter that deck, so to say.
Um, yeah,
My opinion.
yeah. I think blue hybrids is definitely like, or more specifically, blue ancient definitely feels more of the sit and wait category. Like, obviously, with all of these bans and restrictions, if they were actually real, um, I think that it it definitely would change the meta quite a lot. And I don't know if blue hybrids would still be. It probably would be. So like maybe it wouldn't be as egregious if the actual like bans to the current restricted cards gets enacted. So like I think without Ukomon, I'm just gonna add like a new number. So number 3 is like cards that are currently restricted that probably should just get straight up banned.
Yeah, because we were saying calling, the Hammer Spark,
Yeah,
and even the Uka.
Louis, yeah, Uko, Anubis. Um, honestly, like I don't really think Buko needs it. Calling needs it. That's a definite. Um, him potential needs it. So like I think honestly, just by curving the Ukomon and the Louis, that really impacts the deck. Because the only other thing I could think of that you would want to hit out of like the ancient decks more specifically, and it's not even specifically targeting the ancients. I think like the card is just kind of overtuned for what it actually is. This might honestly be the last card that I can think of. And that's going to be analog.
Yeah, and I think Analog is actually another good hit, potentially, just because of the fact that we have seen from time and time that card coming up, and everyone has been like, they've looked at it, but they felt like there was other cards that could have gotten hit. So Analog is kind of one of those cards where it keeps coming up in these decks that are able to really use it the best, but nobody's focused on it because there's other good things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like analog. I think like the big problem is like what analog is doing is like actually kind of insane because it's basically an honorary purple card. because revealing the top three, whatever, that's looking specifically for Digimon, not that big of a deal. I mean, it kind of is, being the cheapest consistency tool that grabs the deepest for its cost. But the fact that it trashes the rest of the cards is like highly abusable, especially the alterns ability, like when a level 5 or higher with an inheritable gets deleted, you just get to hatch another egg and gain a memory is like actually kind of insane. And part of why the ancient decks are doing as well as they are is because they'll always have a source. They're almost always killing themselves, allowing you to trigger Analog Youth. And then Analog Youth can still incidentally be used in a lot of other decks too. Granted, yes, it does end up hurting those decks now that they lose access to Analog. But, I mean, what can you do? You can't make everyone happy. And it's not like those bad decks actually get any, like, yes, they do get worse, but the good decks were already so good that the bad decks losing a good card functionally still wouldn't matter on the bad decks, is kind of where I'm getting at. Like, that power gap is just too big to where it realistically matters. And then, like, this is, I guess, like, the real last card is, it's always going to be my hot take, and I will die on this hill, but the training option cards is, like, honestly the last thing that I want gone from the game. So if I was Big Bandai, and I was actually examining where a lot of these issues in terms of tempo are stemming from, it's stemming from the training cards. Like, it honestly is. These cards were a borderline mistake. Because the idea of them is like, yes, okay, you're banking the memory, but if you already think about the cards that we currently have, we already have the memory boosts that bank the memory anyway. It's just memory boosts are more fair because they cost more. So that's like that fine balancing tool where it's just like, okay, yes, you could theoretically do more with just gaining memory versus a cost reduction, but the way the game currently plays out, like, the training cards are functionally better than just digivolving for 2 in the raising. Because you could digivolve for 2, get a card draw and cycle that way, lose out on your Digimons when digivolving ability, or you could play a training card, bank that evolution, and then be able to gain even more value and benefits from your level 4 Digimon. Like, the card was designed to push the new philosophy of rookies being raised out of the hatchery to be able to gain some additional effects and make the level 4s more useful as a result of making the level 3s more useful. And as we currently have seen and experienced through this whole past year of having these cards, it's only been problematic and damaging to the game on decks basically being forced to run 3 to 4 copies, or I guess 2 to 4 copies of this card. And it's not just specifically for this, because, like, part of the reason why Greymon started falling is because he couldn't use the training cards to be able to keep up with the rest of the decks. It's not necessarily all Greymon X Anybody's fault. It's the training cards' fault. And the new set of memory boosts that's coming out with the LM December set, the special set, that'll help Greymon. But at the end of the day, it's still just a memory boost, and it's nowhere near as efficient as a training card. And I think for the cost and what these cards are doing, it's just too problematic. It honestly is just too much of a tempo gain, because that's in part why Cerberus is doing well. That's in part why a lot of decks are doing as well as they are, is because that banked evolution means you have these more explosive turns to end the games quicker.
Yeah, so I'm kind of on the fence when it comes to the whole training cards. Like, I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, as a player who might have a deck that it needs the comeback in order to try to win, or even, like, searching out your pieces, like finding a tamer or that option card you need. Like, I hear what you're saying, but I also look at it this way, to where it's not necessarily the training cards' faults. It's like the fact that we have the level 4s that are able to abuse and break them even further, I think is what kind of causes the problem. Like the whole Galgamon thing of, oh, free Evo, then you make your opponent add a card to their hand. Oh, they so happen to have 8 cards in hand. Gain another memory. Oh, my Galgamon in the sources. Oh, you added a card in hand, I gain another memory. Like, something like that. Or even the Cerberus, like, evoing for free, and then you could do the yada yada, therefore allowing you to gain additional memory, setting you even further up. I don't know if, like, the training cards are, so to say, the exact problem. Because, like, even, like, there's some decks, like, for example, the Imperial Mon deck, that's dual color. It doesn't use those training cards because it relies on having it needs to see both the blue and the green, and I guess is what I'm trying to get at too. It's like there's sometimes we see good decks that don't even use the training cards. I even think like the hybrids don't even use them because they can't use them.
Right, that's what I'm getting at, is like, so this warps any stack-based deck to then now be forced to run these types of cards. Any non-traditional stack-based deck doesn't need them because they're already moving faster because of how they're playing. So, like, it takes almost zero effort for any of the ancient decks to actually go up into their ancient. Like, literally almost zero effort, and they're highly efficient to use. And they don't need the training cards because they're already that efficient, so they put those attentions in other areas. Whereas a stack-based deck, it wants to basically move out and explode as impactfully as possible. And the fact that you have all of these cards that are hyper-efficient on banking your evolutions only makes those types of things even worse. That's why, like, Mirage is running 4 trainings and 4 memory boosts. And they started cutting out rookies and some of their other, like, level 4s and 5s, and they're only running, like, 1 level 6 now because that's the only one that they need. And they could do this because of the higher levels of consistency that the training cards are going to be giving on top of the memory boosts. And we see this right now with Lord Nightmon, where it's like, yes, Lord Nightmon with the Dobermon package and the dog package is that cracked because of the training cards. Like, honestly, because you have your classic turn 2, use your rookie, move it out of raising, crack the training card, to then go into Dobermon to now net memory, which sets up your level 5. Remove the training cards, and now they have to work harder to do that. And the point I'm trying to make is, that's okay. Like, that is honestly okay. If they were trying to depower and de-speed the game, take out the most egregious offending cards that enables the most degenerate stuff to happen. So at least that's my argument on it.
Yeah, no, and trust me, like I said, I hear the argument too on that. So like I kind of see both sides of it. But I think if the training cards literally just made it to where it was a 2 cost and then you reduce the evil cost by 1, I don't even think we would have half the problems, like this whole back and forth about that argument of the training cards.
Oh, 100%. Because the big difference between training cards and memory boosts, 1 is the cost and 2 is the refund. The fact that the training cards is a 100% refund is in part of the problem where the training cards are more balanced because it's not a 100% refund. So you're actually still spending something and you're not just getting it all back for free later. And that's like part of the big tempo shift issues is like, sure, okay, you could still say, again, using the Doberman example, instead of the training card, you just use the memory boost, and it's the same type of play. And I'm just like, yes, it is, but you passed over more memory to your opponent, so now they have a better opportunity to set up and respond. And that's like the big like tug of war push and pull aspect is now you're playing with the memory system. You're not ignoring it. And granted, yes, the non-traditional stack-based decks, they don't run a whole lot of the training cards because they're designed to not have them. And that's like the other big difference. It's just like, okay, I'll just take Digicross as an example. Like, I don't need to use this because I just Digicross for 3, play out my X level Digimon, and then that's it. Like that's where my efficiency is coming from, is it's being made up in other areas. Usually it's being made up in other areas. But yeah, so at this point I really don't know if there's anything else that I would potentially want to add outside of like some of the cards on my nuclear ban list video. But a lot of those were like agnostic of context, where it's just like, I think this card is stupid, therefore it should go. Where this is just more curation on I understand where the meta is and try to start curving some of the top decks to be more in line with the rest of the game. Granted, like some of them, like the training cards, that's a lot more impactful of a decision and would have way more ramifications than probably you or I can even think of. But I digress. That doesn't stop them from being a problem regardless, which is why I'm leaving them at least on my list, which you're looking at. So to kind of like wrap things up and review, Baumon should be limited. Ukomon should be banned. The promo. I wouldn't mind a limit on the other Ukomon, but I don't think Bandai's going to do it. I think Promo Goonie should be limited. Dobermon X Antibody should be limited. Magnamon X Antibody should be banned. Mirage Gaugamon should be limited. Anubismon should be straight up banned. Shangreymon Ruin Mode should be banned. Oh, I guess I could just set these to 1 so that way I could just make it easier on myself. Shangreymon Ruin Mode should be banned. Ko and Sayo should be limited. Ko and Sayo should have more choice restrictions, as well as the choice restriction between Mother and Shoto. Davis and Ken from BT16 should be limited. Analog Youth should be limited. Louis should be straight up banned. Gravity Crush limited. All of the training cards banned. I guess you could just leave. You could just maybe leave them to 1. Like, still keep them around. Hammer Spark should be banned. Blinding Ray should be limited. Hidden Potential Discovered should be banned. Jackrate should be banned. Calling should be banned. And Protoform should be limited. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think that honestly does sound about right.
So I think, like, as a result of this, let me pull up the metadata to kind of see what would kind of rise in the ranks. So this would kind of allow decks like Tyrant to shine a little bit more. Shine should be able to be more relevant again. Bloom probably is still going to be good. Phoenixmon is probably going to be okay. Blue Flare could probably make a return. Dominimon seems still solid. Rapid X gets better. So, like, you could kind of already start to see, like, where some of the falls would happen to where some of the rises in other decks would be able to come up. And because of the fall and the rise, that would cause new waves for potentially a healthier cycle, because as one falls, the others rise in response. So it's not like these are just straight up killing the decks that they're being played in. It's just trying to help curve them so that more decks are actually able to be competitively viable. That was the whole goal and intention behind this. So,
yeah, because I know normally I don't like killing off decks, but there are some times where a deck might have to just be like, okay, you were just that too good. It's like the
Yes.
one exception, I would say.
Yeah. Because I don't want to just straight up kill, like, Lord Nightmon, because I think the card's, like, it's good, but it's only as broken because the purple engine is moving as fast as it is, and I think that's part of the problem. So I think, like, the only other thing is, like, purple hybrids would seem absolutely insane, but I think that some decks would still be able to come out and be able to check it. I mean, right now, purple hybrids is actually the number one performing deck of the first half of 2.0. So maybe something from purple hybrids more specifically needs to go, but that would require more data to fully comprehend like what the checks and the counters are, and I don't necessarily think we have that solid of a grasp on that yet.
Yeah, because I think if just by hitting the call-in and the Jax rates, because I know at my locals when I was playing against a purple hybrid, the fact that my opponent even got to use 2 of those when their trash was like at 30 cards really allowed them to just keep constantly milling my cards when they were attacking.
Yeah. So I think this is a pretty solid list. It probably could be fleshed out a little bit more if we like put more time and thought into it. But we're already like an hour and a half into this type of a discussion, and like honestly, this is kind of like where my issues were with the game, where it's gotten to such an egregious state that like we need to have a ban list be this big. Like even if I just remove the training cards just for a quick second, just because I put all 6 of them here. So like even if we remove the training cards, just the fact that cards that weren't on the list, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. The fact that we thought of 14 cards very easily based on the current meta trends, that's already the biggest ban list we probably would ever see as of right now to date. And that only goes to show that like, hey, there kind of is just a speed and tempo issue with the game. And if the game just slows down a hair, like it's not even a big slowdown, just a hair, it would allow other decks to be able to enter in and exist, because now they're not gatekept from this specific like speed threshold that they're unable to attain, even with the help of like the training cards and the memory boosts and all the other tempo tools, like the generic tempo tools. So like that again shows and highlights the gap that there is between what's viable and what's not. So, and again, we're not Digimon like proper. We're not Bandai coming up with this. This is just our own thoughts and interpretations. And this isn't going to be perfect because, like, yes, there's probably still gaps and flaws in where the current meta is that we might overlook when it comes to a ban and restriction list. Like, yes, I do think, like, leaving purple hybrids in its current state is somewhat problematic, but at least like there's something here that can help try to curve it. Or if other decks are able to prop up, maybe something that was being gatekept now could be able to enter in and check that deck more specifically. So that's all going into just how a meta dynamic works. So I think for what we have, this is a pretty solid list. In terms of like being able to truly identify and try to fix what's actually wrong with this game that we all love and want to play more of. So, any final thoughts?
I mean, the only other thing I can really think of, I mean, like just trying to even understand why these decks are as good, it kind of helps understand what cards should potentially be even getting hit in ban lists. It's like the whole idea of like, oh, if Jax Raid and the Calling get hit, then does that mean the purple hybrid is able to mill your opponent out as fast as it can, or does it cause it to get slowed down because of that? You know, just understanding some of these like ideas of, okay, what happens if a card like this gets hit? does this kill the deck? Does it slow it down to where the rest of the decks can catch up? Does this open up other opportunities for other decks to, or other colors to even see play now too?
Right. And I think those are all very valid questions that's why we could continue down this like ban and restriction list rabbit hole, is because there's just a lot that goes into a ban and restriction list. I know from experience working on Argent Saga that that's something that is very highly debated on and is a very hot topic. Because it's always a hot topic because one, we have to admit that there was a mistake and a flaw with the game, which designers never like doing. Trust me, we never like doing it. And two, we have to try to understand the game on a higher capacity and different level than what we're actually designing for. That it makes things more complicated than it seems. So it's a very hard task to be able to accomplish.
Yeah, because they're like, I understand, like, maybe the designers don't like to admit when something is like broken and everything, but if you keep ignoring it, it's not going to help solve the problem. So sometimes it's okay to take the loss on something, to admit you're wrong about something.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that's correct. You just have to cut your losses just to try to save the game in whatever capacity you can. I get that there's some money involved, of course. Especially like with reprints and whatnot, it's like it could create some very feels bad situations, but like once you already made your money, usually companies just don't care. They'll burn a couple of bridges like that. Just if it makes the game better, that's all we really want. At the end of the day, because this is the game we want to play, and it can be very daunting to not be able to play it against some of the more top decks. Like, by all means, feel free to go check out my my problems with Digimon video. If anyone hasn't watched that yet, that is probably my best aged video because it's a very informational, dense video that covers a lot of the issues with the game that it's still facing with today, and I made that video almost a year ago. Crazy, right? I used Nationals footage from last year to make that video, and that video still holds true. Um, which to me shows that there actually is a problem, and as a designer, I just want to go in and fix the problem. Granted, Bandai wouldn't listen to me, but that's what YouTube is for, and opinions.
Yeah, because I mean, being in a video like this, or even on a podcast on Spotify and everything, this gets people thinking and trying to understand. Like, if we could all come together and actually talk about what the problem is, we could. I'm not. I'm not saying that we could solve the problem for Bandai, but this could help potentially make people realize, oh, this makes sense why you might want that card hit. Like, I completely understand it.
Yeah, like it's funny. Just go like if anyone's curious, just go over to Bandai's current ban and restriction list. Just read some of their reasonings. Most of the reasonings are speed and tempo related. Like the game is just functionally moving too fast, therefore they need to get rid of this card. That's their reasoning for a lot of them. And honestly, looking at our ban and restriction list, that we would want to see, that's honestly the reason why a lot of the cards are getting hit is because there is a fundamental tempo issue that's ruining the overall pace of the game. And like people are already complaining that turns are taking too long. Well, this is part of it. Like too many actions, too many triggers, too many things are happening on one side that's making games take forever or at least a lot longer is like because I have to go through every single one of them, and if I'm out playing and outpacing your deck like 5 actions to 1, no wonder why people are having a hard time, especially with the casual decks, is because some decks just aren't functionally doing enough. But I digress, and that's a different topic for a different time. I think this episode has already gone on long enough. This was on the longer side, but that's because there was a lot of things to talk about when it comes to bans and restrictions. We try not to take them too serious, but just serious enough to be able to try to formulate our own thoughts and opinions. So feel free down in the comments below to tell us your thoughts and opinions on cards that you think should get banned and limited. Tell us if you agree or disagree with our thoughts and our opinions. That's also a thing that you could comment on. Just any kind of engagement about this type of a topic is usually a good thing. So with that, I think it is time to wrap it up. And I want to thank everyone for coming out and listening to this episode. And I hope to see you all in the next episode. So thanks for listening. Later.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yep, happy holidays.